8. Sierra Dawn Measle. In September of 2018, a 29-year-old stripper from Oregon named Sierra Dawn Measle was filmed hurling racist and xenophobic insults at an Asian American woman in Portland. In the 30-second clip, Measle could be heard calling 22-year-old Selena Kyrell and her friends illegals and saying their parents worked for dirt. The video showed the woman leaning over from the driver's seat of a vehicle and yelling out the window while a female passenger tried to obscure her face, most likely out of embarrassment over how her friend was acting. Kyrell posted the footage on Facebook with a caption stating that she normally doesn't share things on social media, but that she was extremely upset by the treatment she and her friends received during a night out. The young woman accused Measle of mockingly impersonating an Asian accent and making a stereotypical comment about Kyrell's driving. And she further explained that she did absolutely nothing to instigate the confrontation. She was simply parked next to Measle's car and suddenly became a target of the woman's bigotry. The video generated widespread outrage, with many people sharing similar stories about unprovoked racist treatment they'd received from strangers. Numerous Portland residents apologized and reassured Kyrell that Measle's behavior didn't reflect the city's values. Many social media users felt that Measle was getting what she deserved, but Kyrell discouraged people from threatening the woman or sharing her personal information. People had started posting Measle's address and harassing her employer, prompting Kyrell to remove the video. Measle apologized for her ignorant and hateful comments, saying that she felt ashamed for letting her emotions get the best of her. She acknowledged the wrongfulness of her behavior and vowed to do better moving forward. But in an era when everything is captured on video, it's unlikely that she'll ever fully live the incident down. 7. Britney Bianche. At around 8:30 p.m. one evening in the fall of 2023, a 31-year-old Florida woman named Britney Bianche was pulled over by state highway patrol officers for allegedly going on a 120-mile-per-hour joyride while under the influence in St. Petersburg. During the traffic stop, she allegedly became aggressive and physically attacked an officer. In body cam footage of the encounter, the young woman can be seen and heard screaming and cursing at the cops, calling them names and claiming that their allegations against her won't hold up in court. She was subsequently released on bonds totaling nearly $18,000. Bianche stands accused of scratching the officer with her fingernails, and this is reportedly her third DUI case over a 10-year period. In light of the most recent incident, she was also charged with resisting an officer with violence, battery on law enforcement, possession of marijuana, possession of drug paraphernalia, speeding, and driving without vehicle insurance. For now, though, the case appears to be ongoing. 6. Nico Rios. Late one night in December of 2023, police in Williston, North Dakota, pulled over a state lawmaker for failing to stay in his lane. Body cam footage showed 39-year-old Republican Representative Nico Rios handing an officer his business card when he was asked for his driver's license and registration. During a field sobriety test, Rios allegedly began hurling racist and homophobic slurs at the officers. And according to a police report, he also had slurred speech and struggled to put sentences together. Rios refused a breathalyzer, telling the officers that he lived just 2 blocks away. And as a result, he was booked on charges of DUI, refusing a chemical test, and having an open container. At one point in the video, he could be heard telling the cops that they were going to regret picking on him and that they didn't know who the expletive he was. As he was being handcuffed, Rios asked the officers if he could drop his truck off at his residence, which isn't how things work during an arrest. He called one officer a homophobic slur and demanded his phone after being placed in the back of a squad car so he could call the state's attorney general and complain about how the police were treating him, even though they weren't treating him badly. Rios could also be heard telling Officer Alexander Welch, a U.S. citizen who grew up in England, that he didn't think British people should be arresting Americans, He proceeded to comment on the UK's refugee crisis and how the country is supposedly being overrun by foreigners. Then, in a bizarre flex that was far more laughable than intimidating, Rios told Welch that he was going to fight harder for England than Welch ever would, then called him the B word. The allegedly boozed-up politician continued running his mouth and spewing inflammatory comments while Welch refused to react. And it wasn't long before footage of the incident went viral, prompting Rios to issue an apology, saying that he regretted his poor decisions and felt deeply embarrassed about his behavior. Whether he's truly sorry or simply sorry he got caught may never be known, but the disgraced lawmaker received heavy criticism from fellow representatives on both sides of the aisle, making it clear that this type of behavior will not be tolerated among North Dakota's public officials. 5. Bob Menendez. In September 2023, federal authorities announced an indictment against Democratic New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez for bribery and other corrupt practices. Prosecutors claimed that Menendez and his wife Nadine conspired with New Jersey businessmen Wael Hanna, Jose Uribe, and Fred Dybus to carry out their alleged crimes starting in 2018. More specifically, the couple is accused of stashing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gold bars that were stolen at gunpoint in an armed robbery back in 2013. The illicit loot was reportedly recovered from the Menendez's home, where it was identified as stolen based on the serial numbers on the gold bars. According to authorities, Bob and Nadine Menendez received the gold bars as payment in a bribery scheme involving the Egyptian government and the trio of businessmen who were also named as defendants in the indictment. Some of the gold bars recovered from the couple's home were allegedly linked to businessman Fred Dybus, who was listed in documents as a victim of the 2013 armed heist. Court documents state that in November of that year, Dybus was beaten and robbed by 4 assailants at his apartment in Edgewater, New Jersey. The suspects reportedly made off with jewelry, cash, and at least 22 gold bars. Each gold bar had a unique serial number that was never used on any other gold bar, and the numbers on the bars found at the Menendez home allegedly matched up with the serial numbers of the bars that were reported stolen. Additionally, records show that in June of 2021, defendant Wael Hanna purchased 22 gold bars, indicating that the supposedly stolen property changed hands between several of the individuals listed in the case. In addition to being accused of accepting the gold bars as payment in a bribery scheme, Menendez allegedly took jewelry, mortgage payments, a luxury vehicle, and other gifts from his alleged co-conspirators. Public servants are often held to higher standards of right and wrong than the average person. If the accusations that Menendez faces are true, it would come as a major disappointment to the community he represents. In a statement following his arrest, the disgraced senator said that the allegations being levied against him are just that, allegations. But the outcome of the case remains to be seen. 4. Sabine Bisi. Brazilian heiress Sabine Bisi was the daughter of the country's most prominent art collector, Jean Bisi, who passed away in 2015. Born in Romania in 1928, Jean moved to Brazil 20 years later, where he spent the rest of his life while building his fortune. In 2022, 7 years after Jean's death, Sabine and her wife Rosa Stanesco were arrested for allegedly scamming Sabine's mother, Genevieve Bisi, out of nearly $150 million worth of artwork, jewelry, and cash. According to investigators, Sabine began plotting against her mother in 2020. But in the meantime, Stanesco remains behind bars as she awaits trial for her pending charges. Aside from the situation at hand, little is known about Sabine's life, including whether she had any kids or what drove her to the point of allegedly scamming her own mother out of a 9-figure fortune. 3. Jamie Noel. Former Clark County, Indiana Sheriff Jamie Noel appeared on national television starting in 2016, during seasons 1 and 2 of the hit reality series 60 Days In. The show features participants who go undercover to learn more about the root causes of the dysfunction at problematic jails throughout the United States, and they offer their insight on what could help to improve these facilities. During his appearances on the series, Noel seemed like a good guy who wanted to improve the conditions at the Clark County Jail. But his character was called into question in early 2024 when he was accused of paying child support with local fire department funds. He's currently facing 15 felony charges, including fraud, theft, misconduct, and public corruption. According to court documents, Noel fathered a child with a woman other than his wife while acting as the leader of the Utica Volunteer Fire Department. He allegedly made dozens of child support payments using money from the organization's coffers, while failing to claim the payments on his taxes or payroll despite being legally required to do so. Additionally, Noel is accused of selling the woman a BMW that was listed under the fire department's ownership in early 2023 for $21,000. Yet, investigators were unable to trace the payment for the vehicle. A search warrant describes the mysterious transaction as an act of so-called layering in order to make it less traceable. The document also revealed that the Indiana State Police plan to appoint a special prosecutor to the case. According to news reports, the investigation into Noel's alleged crimes began in late 2022. After his successor, Scotty Maples, who was also featured in 60 Days In, noticed some suspicious inconsistencies and other signs of possible criminal activity. Maples reportedly said that employees were complaining about being required to work on Noel's personal projects while on duty and on a taxpayer-funded payroll. Noel is also accused of trying to defraud the pension system, but as of now, he remains free on a $75,000 bond amid his ongoing case. 2. Discriminatory delivery. In a disturbing act of discrimination that was captured on camera in December 2023, a black Amazon worker named Jemiah Miller was accused of being a thief by a pair of white women at a Houston apartment building. The 25-year-old was at the complex to make a delivery when the same resident who buzzed her in approached her and told her she wasn't supposed to be there. TikTok footage showed the resident and another woman ganging up on Miller and assaulting her. And in the video, one of the women could be heard yelling, "We've had thieves here, and you're a thief." Miller politely but firmly said, "Excuse me," and told the women not to touch her. But the woman didn't listen and continued to put her hands on Miller while her counterpart threatened to call the building's security. In response, Miller said, "Okay, yeah, do that, please, because she's harassing me." The woman repeated her threat to call security, at which point Miller replied, "Thank you, please call security." Angered by what she apparently believed was a misunderstanding, the woman clarified that she was calling security on Miller. At the same time, the other woman, the one who was getting physical toward the Amazon driver, could be heard pushing Miller against a wall. Miller repeatedly said, "Excuse me," while trying to get past her attacker, and she later told local station KHOW that the woman was hitting her with a cell phone, spewing racist statements, and blocking her from going anywhere. The altercation finally ended when a doorman intervened, giving Miller a chance to escape her captor and dial 911. Speaking with KHOU, Miller said that the attack left her traumatized to the point where she was no longer sleeping and eating normally. In her own words, Miller stated, "It was the scariest thing because I didn't know how it was going to end." According to the most recent available updates on the incident, Houston police were investigating, but no arrests have been made so far. Meanwhile, Miller and many others are calling for the accused attackers to be held accountable for their alleged actions. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Jacob LaGrone. 29-year-old Jacob LaGrone gained social media fame in late 2023 when he married 26-year-old car dealership heiress Madeleine Brockway in a so-called wedding of the century in Paris. Literally no expense was spared in the $59 million 5-day event, which included an exchanging of vows at the famed Chateau de Villette, a Maroon 5 concert at the Paris Opera House, and an overnight stay at the Palace of Versailles. Just weeks later, however, Legrone went viral for a vastly different and far less impressive reason. And this time, he seemed far less eager for the attention he received as he walked into and out of a Texas courtroom. He currently stands accused of 3 charges of aggravated assault against a public servant for allegedly wielding a gun and firing shots at 3 cops. The incident in question occurred in March of 2023, roughly 8 months before the wedding, when Legrone allegedly brandished a firearm at police in Westmouth Village and Westover Hills. He was indicted months before the story broke, though. According to an exclusive Daily Mail report, the aggressive confrontation came during the early morning hours after a fight between Legrone and Brockway at their $1.4 million home, which the bride's tycoon father purchased for the couple in 2022. Legrone's bodyguard could be seen pushing past the media and slamming the courtroom door as he ushered the wealthy defendant into the courthouse for a closed session that reporters weren't privy to the details of. Court documents revealed that Legrone was offered a plea deal that would come with a 25-year prison sentence. His attorney, Rhett Parham, failed to respond to NBC's request for comment on the matter. Meanwhile, Madeleine Brockway deleted her Instagram account. She wasn't present at her new husband's court hearing, and event company HMR Designs removed content featuring the couple's wedding from its social media pages. For now, the case appears to be ongoing, so whether or not Legrone's privileged position will influence the outcome remains to be seen.
17. The Sparks family. After turning the tables on a home intruder back in April 2022, a family from Bakersfield, California realized they were in hot water with the law. The incident happened during the early morning when 50-year-old John Sparks caught someone breaking into his swimming pool business. While responding to Sparks' 911 call at 3 or so in the morning, officers found the suspect, later identified as Scott Sparks, with no actual relation to John, lying motionless in the parking lot with his wrists zip-tied behind his back. According to a police report, John Sparks saw on his security footage that someone had gone inside the fenced property and was removing items from a car. He chased after the suspect on foot and caught up with him outside another local business, where he confronted the thief with a gun. Sparks allegedly fired one warning shot in Scott's direction without hitting him, then forced him to the ground and used the zip ties to tie up his wrists. Prosecutors claim that John was then joined by 2 of his sons, 23-year-old Brendan Sparks and 20-year-old Trenton Sparks, and that the 3 men proceeded to spend the next 45 minutes punching, kicking, and striking the thief with several objects. When they decided that Scott had had enough, the trio loaded him into a truck and drove him back to the custom pool shop, where they dialed 911 and met responding officers. Scott was then taken to the hospital with significant head and facial injuries. He admitted to the burglary and even apologized for it. When he told authorities about the assault he endured before police were called, the investigation took a strange turn, with the young man now being considered the victim. In the initial aftermath of the incident, the Sparks family was allowed to go back home. A few days later, the Kern County Sheriff's Office criminally charged all 3 men with assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy, and kidnapping. If convicted, they could face up to 7 years each in prison. Although the criminal cases seem to be ongoing, this situation hasn't ended well for anyone so far. It's safe to say that everyone involved, including the burglar turned victim and the Sparks trio, completely regretted their actions afterward. Some people think that if you catch someone stealing from your property, it's okay to physically assault them. Others believe that it should only come down to a fight if the victim has to defend themselves. 16. August Williams. In 2019, a woman from North Carolina got the scare of a lifetime when a man approached her one night in North Charlotte and tried to kidnap her. 47-year-old August Williams, the alleged culprit, was trying to stuff the woman into his car when she broke free and ran into a nearby karate dojo. The head instructor at the facility, Randall Ephraim, later told CNN that he was cleaning up after a class when the woman suddenly rushed inside and said someone was trying to hurt her. A large man soon came inside the dojo. Ephraim assumed he was there to talk about classes and asked how he could help. The man allegedly said he was there for the girl, who continued to insist that she didn't know who the man was and that he was trying to abduct her. Speaking with CNN, Ephraim said he asked Williams to get out, but the accused kidnapper said he wasn't going anywhere. Williams then allegedly tried to push his way deeper into the dojo, at which point Ephraim did what he felt was necessary to defend himself and forced the suspect out of the building. The karate instructor said that the suspect tried to attack him again once they were outside, and that he handled the situation accordingly. Local news station WSOC also noted that the suspect tried to assault police officers before he was taken into custody. The encounter ended with Williams getting loaded into an ambulance and taken to the hospital. We're not sure why he thought he could take on a karate teacher with no training himself, but criminals usually aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. 15. Dylan Molina. Euless, Texas Police Detective Alex Cervantes was off duty when a drunk driver ran a red light in front of him and hit his car back in November 2021. The officer's wife and 2 children were also in the sedan when it was struck at an intersection in Lake Worth. Cervantes passed away from his injuries, while the rest of his family was simply injured. 26-year-old Dylan Molina tried to leave the scene on foot after crashing his Jeep into the family's car. But a man who witnessed the accident was not about to sit idly by and let that happen. In a harrowing pursuit that was captured on film, the bystander chased after Molina and ordered him to stop. Footage that was released in 2023 showed the Good Samaritan pursuing the man while yelling things like, "You stay right there," and "You see what you did? You killed somebody." His words were riddled with profanities that we probably shouldn't repeat, but we're sure you can imagine what he might have said. In the video, Molina could be seen tripping and falling onto the ground, bringing the short chase to an end. The man who pursued him physically restrained the suspect until police arrived. According to investigators, Molina drank about 8 double vodka Red Bulls, the equivalent of 16 alcoholic drinks, in less than 3 hours at a nearby taco restaurant called Fuzzy's. He started drinking at 10:40 in the morning and left the restaurant around 1:12 in the afternoon. His blood alcohol content was over twice the legal limit for driving when he hit the Cervantes family. At the start of 2023, Molina pleaded guilty to charges of intoxication manslaughter and 3 counts of intoxication assault. He was handed a 15-year prison sentence for the manslaughter charge and 10 years for each intoxication assault charge, which will be served concurrently. In other words, he'll only serve 15 years total. Around the same time, authorities took the restaurant's bartender, Kayla Richardson, into custody on a misdemeanor charge of over-serving alcohol. Surveillance footage from the day Molina drank at Fuzzy's seems to show him coming out from an employee-only area and walking behind the bar. Richardson was seen motioning for him to go back around the bar and sit down. As Molina stumbled over a stool, the bartender helped him back up to his feet. He stumbled around a bit more before finally leaving the restaurant. The crash happened within moments of him walking out the door. After finding Molina's drink unattended, Richardson looked out at the parking lot, then removed the drink from the bar. Authorities are now accusing her of missing obvious signs that Molina was incredibly drunk and failing to take action when she had every chance to stop something deadly from happening. If convicted, she could face up to a year behind bars as well as a $4,000 fine. 14. Store owner put shoplifters on blast. In early 2023, the owners and workers at the boutique store Sugar Hawaii had to deal with as many as 3 shoplifting cases a day at the store's 4 locations on the island of Oahu. The business was hit especially hard during the holiday season, And while many thieves think stores can afford the loss of merchandise, this wasn't the case for Sugar Sugar Hawaii. As a small business with only a handful of merchants, the company was and is deeply affected by thefts, including those of small items, which can quickly add up to big losses. In an attempt to curb the ongoing issue and to bring some shoplifters to justice, the business started posting surveillance photos of suspects on social media and asking the public for help identifying the suspects in the photos. Some people disapproved of the assertive strategy, while others thought it was a great way to show that shoplifting isn't tolerated and that anyone who steals can expect to have their picture show up on the store's page. Eve Weiler, who was visiting Hawaii from California when the story first broke, told ABC 17 News that she thinks it's a great way to hold burglars accountable. She mentioned how thieves often think they've got away with their crime and will never have to answer for it once they walk out the doors. The new method of catching suspects has actually been wildly successful, according to company president James Gishen, who estimated that about 95% of alleged shoplifters were caught after being featured online. He said that in many of the cases, people return merchandise after seeing their photo pop up online. And there's no such thing as a typical thief, according to Gleason, who told ABC that they come from all backgrounds and ages, and include students, the elderly, and even the wealthy. Before posting any pictures, the staff usually go through a thorough process of consulting a security team and verifying that each person is a confirmed suspect, and that they have reason to believe the person took something without paying for it. 13. Nicholas Norton. A 90-year-old retired boxer was simply relaxing in the living room of his Hull, England home one day, back in 2022, when a man suddenly came to his front door faking a leg injury. The senior citizen let the seemingly hurt person inside and left for a moment to get a rag for the man to clean his wound with. Nicholas Norton took this opportunity to grab the old man's wallet and run away. After realizing that he'd been set up, the former middleweight champion and military veteran got into his car and drove around nearby to look for the thief, who he eventually spotted at a nearby store. Determined to get his wallet back, he told a security guard what was happening and searched the store for Norton, who was about to pay for a bottle of whiskey. The old man said that he grabbed Norton by the scruff of the neck and smacked him on the chin, then asked where his wallet was. Norton allegedly claimed he didn't have it, but was quick to hand the wallet over when the victim threatened him. But it didn't just end there. When the victim realized his bank cards weren't in the wallet, he demanded to know where they were. The suspect said he hid them outside, so the older man struck him in the head again, at which point Norton pulled the cards out of his pockets and gave them back. By the time the retiree got his wallet back completely, the culprit had only managed to buy a candy bar with the stolen debit card. In a statement, the victim said that it's not right how thieves often target elderly victims. And while he suffered from high blood pressure, leg, and hand issues, he still really wanted his wallet back. While in police custody, Norton admitted to stealing the wallet and buying items with the victim's card. He also mentioned that he would probably be going back to prison, indicating that this wasn't his first close call with the law. He was apparently looking at 5 years behind bars for what he did. The elderly man told the press that in addition to being a former boxing champion, he makes it a point to stay in shape despite his old age. He said his daughter told him he was too old to be recklessly chasing after burglars, but he insisted he acted out of instinct. The pensioner also said that he hoped the situation taught the thief a lesson and that Norton should think twice before trying to rob another senior citizen. By then, Norton already had 80 previous convictions under his belt, including 44 for theft, so it's unlikely he learned anything at all. But at least he was taken off the streets for 3.5 years worth of prison. 12. Chelsea Leyon. Many people see drug dealing as a victimless crime, since the majority of street-level transactions are consensual and non-violent. In other words, the customer chooses when to buy and use the drugs. Nobody forces them to do it. This mentality also goes by the philosophy that the drug user will likely find the product one way or another, and that this somehow makes the dealer less culpable if the drugs make a person sick or even kill them. But law enforcement doesn't see it that way. While selling drugs can come with harsh punishments, authorities in some parts of the United States have started looking for ways to bring the hammer down even harder in recent years, as the country's been plagued by an ongoing opioid epidemic. In early 2016, 3 women in Cattaraugus County, New York, were hit with homicide charges for selling fentanyl-laced heroin that caused multiple deadly overdoses. One of those women was Chelsea Lyons, who was accused of giving the drug to a married man she was having an affair with. Lyons introduced 42-year-old Matthew Harper to heroin back in 2014. The man entered rehab later that year after his wife discovered the scandalous affair. After going through treatment, he went back to school and continued focusing on fixing his marriage. He was only a few months away from getting his degree when he fatally overdosed at Lyon's home in February 2016. It was believed to be his first time using after being sober for 6 months. Leyon was just one of the 3 women from Leyon who was arrested for the deadly overdoses that happened over a month-long period. It was the first time prosecutors in the area pursued homicide charges against drug dealers. And while the charges against the other 2 women were eventually dropped, the case against Leyon stuck. Harper and Leyon used from the same batch of heroin the night of Harper's death. Prosecutors argued that the woman was responsible for the tragedy since she sold Harper his portion of the drug. Speaking with the Olean Times-Herald, District Attorney Laurie Riemann described Leyon as an experienced user who should have known Harper wouldn't have a high tolerance for the drug after being clean for so long. Leon's defense attorney, Matthew Albert, argued that his client and Harper made consensual bad choices together, and that the only difference between the two is that one of them died. Albert also said that Harper contacted Leyon and asked her to help him get the heroin, which she agreed to, but that she was not a career drug dealer. In April 2017, Leyon pleaded guilty to criminally negligent homicide, making her the first seller in Cattaraugus County to be convicted for a user's fatal overdose. She was also convicted of criminal sale of a controlled substance and a possession charge, and was handed 1 to 3 years in prison, followed by an additional year of probation. 11. Morel B Tyler. During one morning in October 2022, a masked intruder went inside an apartment in Kokomo, Indiana, and tried to hold 3 men at gunpoint during an armed robbery. Instead of listening to the gunman's orders, the trio immediately jumped into action, knocking the gun out of the suspect's hand and tackling him to the ground. A struggle ensued, and the suspect fired a shot as he tried pulling the weapon on the victims. Luckily, nobody was hit by the stray bullet. Using his own gun, one of the victims disarmed and subdued the would-be robber, while the police were called to the scene. Responding officers found the suspect pinned to the floor and covered in facial injuries. He was identified as 18-year-old Morel B Tyler and was taken for medical treatment before being booked into custody on suspicion of felony burglary. In his mugshot, his face seemed to be covered in cuts and he had a swollen black eye. The victims were also injured but didn't need medical attention. They were never charged in the case either. If convicted of the burglary charge, Tyler could face a prison sentence of 3 to 7 years. 10. Brave nun stops botched robbery. As the director of the Response to Love Center in Buffalo, New York, Sister Mary Janice Radkiewicz gives meals and guidance to some of the city's neediest citizens. In 2023, she just finished her morning prayers one Saturday when she heard a strange sound from outside and saw a ladder against the building. Sister Janice went outside to investigate. As soon as she opened the door, she saw 2 men, one on the ground and another on top of the building's roof, where he and his accomplice were supposedly planning to steal gutters and pipes for scrap metal. One of the suspects fled the scene right then and there. The brave nun later told the Buffalo News that she said, "Get out of here, this is God's mission. What are you doing to his property?" She knocked the ladder down, leaving the man on the roof no other choice but to jump down. As soon as he landed, he ran in the opposite direction of his accomplice, while Sister Janice prayed that neither of them were hurt. Even if the thieves had gotten their hands on the building's fixtures, they wouldn't have gotten much money for the pieces. After having the copper gutters and downspout stolen a few years earlier, the center had already replaced them with aluminium. The facility took to social media with the story, along with photos of the suspects in hopes that members of the public would come forward and identify them. Unfortunately, the would-be thieves remain at large to this day. There's a good chance they had to keep a low profile in order to not get caught, since the story went viral and made national news headlines. Sister Janice was even invited to make an appearance on the Tucker Carlson Tonight before his departure from Fox News Entertainment. During the show, she said that the incident inspired her to look back on the importance of serving God's mission and helping others. She explained that the center is in one of Buffalo's poorest neighborhoods and that is often subject to theft and violence. But Sister Janice doesn't let this stop her from continuing to serve the community. She described the center as a safe and special place where people can come together for a shared meal, and her response to the men who tried messing with her vision showed just how determined she was to protect it. 9. Bruce Moreway. While on the way to a job interview in North Olmsted, Ohio during early 2021, 57-year-old Bruce Moreway allegedly decided that robbing a bank was easier than making an honest living. According to police, he went into a key bank inside a shopping center and demanded money from the teller while saying he had a gun. The cashier handed over the cash quickly, and the thief left without hurting anyone. He was long gone by the time police officers arrived. Moreway's parole officer from an unrelated case recognized him in a surveillance photo that police posted on social media. In the picture, the suspect was wearing his COVID mask improperly, exposing more of his face than he should have and making him recognizable to his PO. After finding out that law enforcement was actively looking for him, Moreway turned himself in by going inside a Dollar General store and asking employees to call the police. He was subsequently booked into the Cuyahoga County Jail on suspicion of robbery. According to Ohio prison records, he's now serving an 11.5 to 30-year sentence for multiple charges, including robbery and aggravated robbery. His earliest possible parole date is 2026, and it's probably safe to assume that Moreway wishes he had gone to the job interview. 8. Gary Bailey. In 2022, a man was peacefully sleeping with his girlfriend on their apartment's living room sofa in Dublin, Ireland, when he heard a strange noise coming from inside his bedroom. He got up and discovered that there was an intruder. His thoughts immediately went to protecting his girlfriend. Acting on instinct, the man fought hard to restrain the suspect, later identified as 45-year-old Gary Bailey. He wrapped his legs around the intruder, but Bailey grabbed at the man's crotch in response, causing him to scream out in pain. The girlfriend was awake by this point and had realized there was an unwelcome presence in the home. Acting on her boyfriend's instructions, she grabbed a knife from the kitchen and called law enforcement. In the meantime, Bailey managed to break free. He made it halfway out the window before the victim started beating his legs with a golf club. As he continued scrambling to get out, Bailey got caught up in the blinds, causing him to dangle briefly by his foot before falling to the ground down below. He also broke a TV during the tense struggle. Authorities were unable to question Bailey for 6 hours after his arrest due to his mental state. He later said that he was out of his mind high on pills, and that when he noticed an apartment window was open, he saw an opportunity to sneak in and take what he could get his hands on. The court heard about how it wasn't a thoroughly planned out robbery, but instead a spur-of-the-moment crime. Bailey also said that he knocked on the victim's window a few times and only went inside after he got no response and concluded that nobody was home. Once the resident attacked him, he said that his only goal was to get out as soon as possible. His lawyer told the court that his client had a long history of drug addiction, that he'd tried to get sober several times, and that he felt remorseful for his actions. Bailey ultimately decided to add to his growing list of burglary convictions by pleading guilty. The judge acknowledged the seriousness of the crime, but conceded that the defendant was focused on escaping once he knew someone was actually home, and that he didn't commit any gratuitous violence. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison for the crime. 7. MMA fighter versus armed mugger. A thief chose the wrong person to try stealing from in early 2019 when he targeted Brazilian UFC star Poliana Viana. The 26-year-old fighter was waiting for an Uber in Rio de Janeiro when the thief brandished a fake gun and demanded she give him her phone. Putting her MMA skills to use, Viana punched and kicked at the man, then put him in a rear-naked choke until police arrived. Viana later told MMA Junkie that the would-be bandit sat down next to her and asked for the time. She told him, but he didn't go away, so she knew something fishy was happening. At that point, the man tried to rob her while warning her he was armed. The so-called gun was very obviously too soft to be real, so Viana knocked him down with 2 quick punches and a kick. He fell over, giving the athlete an opportunity to restrain him. While maintaining the chokehold, Viana guided the wannabe thief back to where they were sitting. She said she remained calm throughout the ordeal. And after throwing the first 2 hits, the suspect realized it would be easier to not fight back. He even begged Viana to let him go, claiming he'd just asked for the time, and asked her to call the police because being at her mercy was scarier than being arrested. Bypassers called the cops while Viana held the man, who was taken to the hospital for medical treatment before going to the police station. According to the fighter, the suspect had recently been arrested for an unrelated crime. Sadly, having to defend herself against criminals was nothing new for Viana, who had been targeted in a previous robbery. During that incident, a thief broke Viana's umbrella and tried stealing her phone, but instead, he got punched in the face. She told MMA Junkie that she was scared during that incident, possibly because the man had someone else with him, but she maintained her tough exterior. 6. Noah Daat. When a man they didn't recognize knocked on the door of a Florida couple's Northport home and asked to speak with someone named Josh, who apparently owed him money, the homeowners immediately got suspicious. The husband told the stranger he had the wrong house, but the man proceeded to break down the door with a baseball bat. Determined to protect their 3 children who were in the home at the time, the husband fought back against the intruder by putting him in a bear hug. His wife rushed over and grabbed the baseball bat, which she then proceeded to beat the suspect with. The man fled the scene, but was later identified as 33-year-old Noah Daat. He was eventually captured by Charlotte County Sheriff's deputies. They picked him up at a hospital, where suspicious employees called the cops thanks to the nature of his injuries. He was trying to get treatment for a black eye and other injuries while using a fake name. Daat was charged with armed burglary, battery, and criminal mischief. He was convicted of burglary and simple battery and was released from prison in 2018 after serving 2 years for the crime. 5. Xavier Thomas Jones. In a terrifying encounter that was captured on surveillance footage, 24-year-old Nishali Alma was attacked after letting a man into the gym at her apartment complex in Tampa, Florida. The woman was working out alone when she saw the man come up to the locked door one day in 2023. Having seen the man there before, Alma buzzed him in, thinking he was just another resident wanting to exercise and had simply forgotten his key. Everything seemed normal for the first few minutes as she continued with her workout. But things took a disturbing turn when the man, 25-year-old Xavier Thomas Jones, approached Alma and tried to grab her waist. She immediately fought back, and for over a minute, the suspect continued to attack as they fell on the ground wrestling. Alma briefly gained the upper hand by grabbing the man's beard and twisting it. She later told ABC 11 that she could tell based on the suspect's expression that it was extremely painful. But Thomas Jones managed to pin her as she continued fighting back and tried to dial 911. Every time she tried to call the police, the suspect grabbed her arm, so she put the phone down and fought as hard as she could manage. Alma's a bodybuilder, and she knew she was considerably stronger than Thomas Jones expected. She hoped he would eventually just get tired and give up. Luckily, it worked. By the end of the video, the attacker was exhausted, enabling Alma to break free and escape the gym. Hillsborough County Sheriff's deputies found Thomas Jones the next day and arrested him on suspicion of battery, false imprisonment, and kidnapping. On the surface, some people might see the situation as a funny example of a guy being beaten up by a girl. But on a more serious note, Alma hoped that the viral video along with her ability to fight off her attacker, served as a source of empowerment for women and a reminder to never give up and to always keep fighting. 4. Alan Slattery. Over 2 weeks in early 2021, 67-year-old Alan Slattery tried to rob 3 banks in Sussex, England by handing tellers a handwritten note demanding cash. But one robbery of a nationwide building society branch failed when the worker couldn't read Slattery's handwriting. Unsure of what else to do, he left the bank empty-handed. Slattery was gone by the time employees figured out that the note actually said, "Your screen won't stop what I've got. Just hand over the 10s and 20s, think about the other customers." Police were still investigating the robbery when he went into another bank about a week later, this time with a more clearly written note, and left with a couple $1,000s. Another week after that, Slattery robbed another bank, and while the cashier could read the note, they refused to hand over money. Once again, he left empty-handed. Authorities caught up with Slattery at his house before any more botched heists could happen and took him into custody on 1 count of robbery and 2 counts of attempted robbery. He pleaded guilty to everything and was sentenced to 4 years in prison followed by 2 years of probation. 3. Anthony Miranda. An MMA fighter was sitting in his car on Chicago's southwest side one day back in 2011 when he was approached by a young man who asked for a lighter. The fighter said he didn't have one, and the stranger, 24-year-old Anthony Miranda, allegedly pulled out a gun, demanded valuables, and ordered the victim out of his car. The pro fighter, who often competed in UFC matches, was unarmed at the time, but as you can probably imagine, he didn't need a weapon to help defend himself. He fought back against the suspect, and as they fell to the ground in a struggle, the victim grabbed the attacker's gun. They continued to fight, and at some point Miranda accidentally discharged the weapon, shooting himself in the ankle. The victim overpowered the suspect and held him down until the police arrived. It wasn't Miranda's first brush with the law, according to the Chicago Tribune. At the time of the botched robbery, he was on parole after being released from prison a year before. He also had several robbery convictions on his record, including multiple residential burglary cases. But it was probably the first time he was completely covered in bruises and scratches in his mugshot. Miranda was charged with armed robbery and aggravated discharge of a firearm and held at the Cook County Jail on $350,000 bond. Since then, he stayed largely out of the news, leaving the outcome of this case unclear. 2. Gregory McCallum. In 2009, when 24-year-old Gregory McCallum broke into his 72-year-old neighbor Frank Corty's house in Oxford, England, he probably didn't expect much of a struggle, especially since he was armed with a knife. But the intruder underestimated the senior citizen's ability to defend himself, and he probably didn't know that Corty was once a boxer. Frank was at home with his wife Margaret at the time. As soon as he saw McCallum lunging at him with a weapon, he moved out of the way. The suspect lost his balance, giving Corty an opportunity to grab him by the wrists and pin him up against the wall. The retiree then delivered 2 powerful right hooks to McCallum's face, leaving the knife-wielding thug with severe facial injuries, including a busted lip and a black eye. Corty restrained McCallum until police got to the scene and took him into custody. He later said that while he didn't knock the young man out, he was clearly stunned by the blows and unable to move. It was revealed in court that the neighbors were in a fight over noise. The rivalry started when police showed up at McCallum's home to address a noise complaint after a summer house party. McCallum assumed that Corty made the complaint and broke into his house the next morning. In court, McCallum's defense lawyer argued that his client looked like he'd been in a car accident, while Corty walked away with minor injuries. The lawyer described the aftermath of the incident as resembling a murder scene. McCallum claimed he had no memory of committing the crime, while the prosecutor accused him of being intoxicated during the break-in. Corty offered no apologies, stating that if he had to, he would do it again in a heartbeat. He also said he was scared when he saw McCallum holding a knife, which he described like a 6-bladed knuckle duster. He said that most people would have reacted the same way he did. In his words, if you can't defend what's yours, where are we at? The pensioner also explained that he was woken up by noise in the middle of the night for months. He described frequently hearing doors slamming, shouting, music, and the other sounds that accompany wild parties coming from the direction of McCallum's home. About an hour and a half before the break-in, Corty had awoken to someone banging on his front door. A jury found McCallum guilty of aggravated burglary. He was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison, while the older man received no charges. 1. Joshua David Henderson. In a bank heist that could be best described as completely bizarre, a man named Joshua David Henderson went into a key bank branch in Portland, Oregon in March 2023, wearing a surgical mask, a Chicago Bulls cap, and what one witness described as lunch lady gloves. According to court documents obtained by local news station Coin, he entered an office holding a cardboard sign that read, "I want top and bottom drawers. Hundreds, 50s, 20s, 10s. I have a gun." The thief told the employee that he didn't want to hurt someone. Unaware that the staff member had secretly slipped a tracking device into the wad of nearly $2,800 in cash she handed over, Henderson simply threw the money in a bag. Before leaving the scene, he said, "Call yourself a lawyer. You've been through a traumatic event." But it was actually the robber who found himself in a regrettable position as police got to work taking down witness reports. Meanwhile, the bank's security system started tracking the GPS device that made its way into the thief's bag. An officer caught up with Henderson only 10 blocks away. As the cop approached, the suspect threw the bag of money into someone's lawn as the GPS unit chirped loudly, making its presence known. Inside the bag, the officer found the stolen cash and the robber's disguise. Henderson was taken into custody on suspicion of robbery. And while he's innocent until proven guilty just like any other criminal defendant in America, he has quite a bit of explaining to do for the items found in his possession and the tracking device that led to his whereabouts.
What's the most cringeworthy display of privilege you've ever seen or experienced personally? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.